She laughed as the words left her mouth. Sharp, careless, cruel. Fly this helicopter, the powerful CEO said, pointing at the rooftop helipad. And I'll marry you. The janitor standing before her didn't laugh back. He simply smiled because he knew a truth she never expected. Stay with this story till the very end, because what happens next will completely change how you see respect, love, and destiny. And before we begin, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Everbell's Tales, where stories aren't just told, they're felt. The rooftop of Harrington Global shimmered under the afternoon sun, a pristine expanse of polished concrete and glass railings that overlooked the entire city like a throne above the world. Wind swept across the helipad, carrying the distant hum of traffic far below. But up here, everything felt separate, elevated, untouchable. Evelyn Harrington stood at the center of it all, her tailored suit flawless, her posture sharp, her presence commanding. At just 32, she had become the youngest CEO the company had ever known, and everyone around her treated that fact like a miracle they were afraid to question. Executives hovered nearby, laughing a little too loudly at her jokes, nodding a little too eagerly at her words. Success followed Evelyn like a shadow, and she wore it proudly. She believed power was earned, and those without it simply hadn't worked hard enough. That belief had guided her for years, hardening into certainty. The celebration was meant to mark a major expansion. Another acquisition, another victory. Champagne glasses clinked, and compliments flew freely. As conversations drifted and groups slowly dispersed, Evelyn's sharp eyes landed on a figure near the elevator doors. A man in a faded janitor's uniform moved quietly across the rooftop, pushing a mop, careful not to interrupt the celebration. His presence felt almost out of place against the luxury and excess surrounding him. He kept his head down, focused on his task, as if he understood that invisibility was part of the job. His name was Daniel Reyes, though no one there knew it. To them, he was just another background detail, someone who cleaned up after important people had finished feeling important. One executive wrinkled his nose and muttered something about maintenance ruining the view. Evelyn heard it and smirked. She had never liked being challenged, even indirectly. Her gaze sharpened as it returned to the janitor. There was something about the way he stood, calm, unhurried, that annoyed her. Confidence without status felt like an insult. "You there," she called out, her voice cutting cleanly through the chatter. Conversation stopped, all eyes turned. Daniel looked up, surprised but composed, his dark eyes steady. "Yes, Mom," he replied respectfully. Evelyn took a slow step forward, heels clicking against the concrete. "You seem comfortable up here," she said lightly, though her tone carried an edge. "Tell me, do you know what that is?" She gestured toward the sleek black helicopter resting behind her, its surface gleaming in the sunlight. Daniel glanced at it briefly. "Yes," he said simply. A ripple of amusement passed through the group. Evelyn raised an eyebrow, intrigued and irritated at once. "Oh," she said. "Then here's a deal." She smiled, a smile that wasn't kind. "Fly that helicopter and I'll marry you." For a heartbeat, the world seemed to pause. Then laughter exploded across the rooftop, sharp, mocking, uncontrollable. Some executives bent over, others wiped tears from their eyes. To them it was harmless entertainment. A powerful woman putting an insignificant man in his place. Daniel stood still, the mop handle firm in his hands. Humiliation pressed against him like heat, but he didn't flinch. He had known mockery before. He had survived worse than laughter. Inside, memories stirred, days when respect came easily, when his presence commanded silence rather than ridicule. But that life felt distant now, sealed away behind choices and losses he rarely spoke of. Daniel had learned that pride could be expensive, and peace often required letting insults pass unanswered. Yet something about Evelyn's words, the careless cruelty wrapped in humor, touched a nerve. Slowly, deliberately, he set the mop aside. The laughter began to fade as people noticed he wasn't reacting the way they expected. Daniel looked at Evelyn, not with anger, but with calm curiosity. "All right," he said quietly. The word landed harder than any shout. The executives blinked. Evelyn's smile faltered, just for a fraction of a second. "Excuse me," she asked. Daniel straightened his back, meeting her gaze fully now. "I'll fly it," he said. Murmurs rippled through the group. Someone laughed nervously. Evelyn tilted her head, studying him, unsure whether she was amused or challenged. "You think this is funny?" she asked. Daniel shook his head. "No," he replied. "I think people often confuse confidence with permission to belittle others." The air shifted. What had begun as a joke now felt uncomfortably real. Evelyn's pride flared. She hated being questioned, especially by someone she believed stood beneath her. "Go on then," she said sharply, stepping aside. "Show us." Security hesitated, unsure whether to intervene, but Evelyn waved them off with a dismissive flick of her hand. "Let him try," she said. "We could all use the entertainment." Daniel walked toward the helicopter, each step steady, unhurried. The wind tugged at his uniform as he approached the cockpit. He placed a hand on the aircraft. Not reverently, but familiarly, like greeting something he understood deeply. That small detail unsettled Evelyn more than she cared to admit. As Daniel climbed into the pilot's seat, the rooftop fell silent. No laughter now, only the wind and the distant city sounds below. Evelyn crossed her arms, her confidence cracking into something closer to uncertainty. She told herself this was absurd, that in a moment he would embarrass himself and order would be restored. But deep down, a question stirred, one she wasn't ready to face yet. Who was this man who didn't beg, didn't joke, didn't shrink? As the helicopter door closed, Daniel adjusted the controls with practiced ease. The engine hadn't started yet, but the moment already felt irreversible. The rooftop no longer felt like a stage for mockery. It felt like the edge of a truth about to surface, one that would challenge everything Evelyn believed about power, worth, and the people she had learned to overlook. For a moment, nothing happened. The helicopter sat still on the helipad, its sleek body gleaming under the sun as if waiting to expose a lie. Evelyn Harrington folded her arms, her jaw tight, already preparing the sharp remark she would make when this little performance collapsed. Around her, executives exchanged glances, some amused, some uneasy. A few pulled out their phones, ready to capture the embarrassment. After all, what harm could there be in letting a janitor pretend? Then the engine roared to life. The sound cut through the air with a force that silenced every whisper on the rooftop. The helicopter blades began to spin. Slow at first, then faster, slicing the wind with growing authority. Evelyn's confident smirk froze. This wasn't the clumsy, hesitant start of someone guessing at controls. This was precise, controlled, professional. The wind whipped harder now, forcing people to step back, their expensive jackets flapping wildly. Glasses rattled, phones lowered. No one laughed anymore. Inside the cockpit, Daniel Reyes was no longer a janitor. His hands moved with instinctive certainty, fingers dancing across switches and levers he hadn't touched in years but had never forgotten. The hum of the engine felt familiar, almost comforting. For the first time in a long while, his chest didn't feel heavy. He adjusted his headset, checked the instruments, and looked straight ahead. Not at the people watching him, not at the woman who had mocked him, but at the open sky beyond the building. The helicopter lifted smoothly off the helipad, not a jolt, not a wobble, just a clean, confident ascent. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat as she watched the aircraft rise, steady and obedient under Daniel's control. Her mind raced, searching for explanations that made sense, explanations that preserved her sense of superiority. But none came. The helicopter banked gracefully, circling the building with expert precision. Below, the city unfolded like a living map, and above, the sky welcomed him back without judgment. Daniel guided the helicopter through a flawless maneuver, every movement deliberate, every turn measured. He felt years peel away, years of grief, of silence, of choosing obscurity over recognition. He remembered the man he used to be, decorated, respected, trusted with machines and lives. He remembered the moment he walked away from it all, the day the noise of the world became unbearable after his wife's death. Flying had reminded him too much of loss back then, of missions completed and one life he couldn't save. Becoming a janitor hadn't been a fall. It had been a refuge. On the rooftop, disbelief hardened into shock. One executive whispered, "That's not possible." Another muttered, "Where did he learn that?" Evelyn stood frozen, her heels planted firmly but her confidence slipping. Every second the helicopter remained in the air dismantled the careless assumptions she had built her world upon. She had always believed she could recognize talent at a glance. Now, she realized how little she had truly seen. The helicopter descended, touching down as smoothly as it had taken off. The blade slowed, the engine powered down, and silence reclaimed the rooftop. Daniel removed his headset and stepped out of the cockpit, the wind tugging lightly at his uniform. For a moment, no one spoke. Even the city below seemed to hold its breath. He walked back toward the group, his expression calm, unchanged, as if he had simply completed a routine task. Evelyn found her voice first, though it sounded unfamiliar, quieter, strained. Who are you?" she asked. Daniel stopped a few feet away, meeting her gaze. Gone was the mocking distance between them. Now there was only truth. "My name is Daniel Reyes," he said evenly. "I work here as a janitor." A few people shifted uncomfortably. He continued, not boasting, not apologizing. "Before that I was a military test pilot. 15 years, classified programs, combat missions, training others to do what I just did." A stunned silence followed. One executive's face drained of color. Another swallowed hard. Evelyn's heart pounded. "Why?" she asked, the single word heavy with confusion. "Why would someone like you be here?" Daniel glanced down at his uniform, then back at her. "Because life doesn't always move forward in straight lines," he said. "After my wife died, flying stopped feeling like freedom. It felt like running away from grief. So I stepped back. I needed something quiet, something honest." He looked around the rooftop. The glass, the power, the polished masks. "No one asks who you were when you're cleaning floors," he added softly. "They only see what you are." The weight of his words settled deeply. Evelyn felt a tightness in her chest she couldn't ignore. She had built her identity on control, on being the smartest person in every room. Yet here stood a man who had lost more than she could imagine and chosen humility over recognition. Her earlier laughter echoed in her mind now, cruel and hollow. "I didn't know," she said weakly. Daniel nodded. "Most people don't," he replied, "and that's okay. Until it becomes disrespect." The executives slowly dispersed, their earlier arrogance replaced by awkward silence. No one met Daniel's eyes. Evelyn remained, rooted to the spot, staring at him as if seeing him for the first time. "What I said earlier," she began. Daniel raised a hand gently, not in anger, but to stop her. "You don't owe me an explanation," he said. "But you might owe yourself a better way of seeing people." As Daniel turned to retrieve his mop, Evelyn felt something shift inside her. Something uncomfortable but necessary. She had mocked him to assert dominance, yet he had responded with dignity, exposing the fragility of her pride without ever raising his voice. Watching him walk away, she realized the helicopter hadn't just taken flight. Her carefully constructed view of the world had lifted too, and it was no longer as solid as she once believed. The rooftop slowly emptied, but the echo of what had happened refused to fade. One by one, the executives retreated toward the elevators, their earlier laughter replaced by stiff nods and hurried silence. The wind swept across the helipad again, but this time it felt different, quieter, almost reflective. Evelyn Harrington remained standing near the glass railing, staring out at the city she had always believed she controlled. Below her, cars moved like tiny sparks of life, each carrying stories she had never considered. For the first time in years, she felt unsteady, not because she was losing power, but because she was beginning to see how narrow her world had been. Behind her, Daniel Reyes picked up his mop, intent on returning to the work he had been doing before becoming the day's unexpected revelation. He had no desire to linger or to savor anyone's shock. Attention had never been what he sought. As he turned away, Evelyn's voice stopped him. "Wait," she said. The word came out softer than she intended, stripped of command. Daniel paused but did not turn immediately. "I owe you an apology," she continued. "What I said earlier was cruel. I used humor to humiliate you, and I'm ashamed of that." Daniel faced her then. There was no triumph in his eyes, no satisfaction, only calm understanding. "People say hurtful things when they feel powerful," he replied gently. "It doesn't make them bad. It just means they haven't learned yet." Those words struck deeper than anger ever could. Evelyn swallowed hard. She had built her career on certainty. Certainty in numbers, in strategies, in herself. Yet here stood a man who had lost everything that once defined him and still carried grace. "You could have exposed me," she said quietly. "You could have embarrassed this company." Daniel shrugged lightly. "I didn't fly to prove you wrong," he said. "I flew because you asked me to, and because sometimes truth deserves air." The honesty in his voice unsettled her. She nodded slowly. About what I said, she added, trying to steady herself. The marriage comment? Daniel offered a small, sad smile. I understood it for what it was, he said. And no, I wouldn't accept a promise born from mockery. The rejection stung, but it felt deserved. In the days that followed, the story spread through the building like a quiet legend. People whispered about the janitor who flew a helicopter, about the CEO who had been humbled. Evelyn found herself watching Daniel differently, not as someone beneath her, but as someone she wanted to understand. She requested a private meeting, not as a superior, but as a listener. I want to do this right, she said during their conversation. Not just for you, but for everyone here. Daniel listened without suspicion. He had learned that real change took time, and words meant little without action. To her credit, Evelyn followed through. She offered Daniel a promotion, not into the cockpit, but into a leadership role overseeing operations and safety, respecting his choice to keep flying personal, not professional. You deserve recognition, she said. On your terms. What surprised Evelyn most was how often she sought Daniel's perspective after that. He spoke thoughtfully, never seeking attention, always grounding discussions in humanity rather than ego. Slowly, the culture shifted, people felt seen, titles softened, conversations deepened. Daniel remained steady through it all, guiding without dominating, reminding others that strength didn't have to shout. Over time, the sharp edge of Evelyn's ambition dulled into something wiser. She still led with confidence, but now it was balanced with humility. Months later, on a quiet evening, Evelyn found herself back on the rooftop. The city glowed beneath a sunset painted in amber and violet. Daniel stood nearby, watching the sky, his hands resting comfortably in his jacket pockets. Evelyn held out a flight helmet. Not as a challenge, not as a joke. This time, she said softly, I'm not testing you. I'm asking if you'll fly with me. Daniel studied her face, searching for arrogance, for hidden mockery. Finding none, he smiled. And this time, he replied, it won't be about proving anything. They lifted off together, the helicopter rising gently into the evening air. From above, the city looked smaller, its divisions less significant. Evelyn felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace, not the satisfaction of winning, but the relief of understanding. When they landed, she removed the helmet, her eyes shining. Thank you, she said, not just for the flight, but for the lesson. Daniel nodded. We all land eventually, he said. What matters is how we treat people before we do. Standing there, side by side, Evelyn realized the promise she had once mocked had transformed into something real. Not marriage, not romance, but respect. And in that respect, both of them had found a new beginning. One built not on power, but on truth, dignity, and the courage to see beyond appearances.